Hello, folks. You're probably getting kind of tired of hearing me with the same introduction, but that's what happens when you have 31 days back to back in the Inktober Zentangle challenge. But today is day 18, and our tangle pattern that we're going to be adding to our composition is Middleton by Yu Ru Chen. And I hope I have not mispronounced that name too horribly. But let's get into this tangle. Let's jump right in. Are you with me today, Gayle?
Sure am.
All right, let's do this. So for this tangle pattern, for Middleton, we need to have a square that we're working with. Now this square could be a division on your tile. It could be an edge of your paper. It could be a square that you draw. I'm just drawing a obviously very sloppy version right here. That should actually be a lot straighter in my case. But it's really a simple and fun pattern to assemble. What we do, once we have our square or our square area that we're going to fill with the tangle pattern, we find the halfway mark on two of the sides. And we add a square inside the square. And you can do this in any of the four corners. I'm just using this one as an example, but you could do the pattern in any direction. It does, if you want to think of it this way or that way or whatever, it's fine. Once we have that square, we're going to aura the outer square or the outer area if it's not actually a drawn square. And we're just going to create another square, at least a partial one, that butts up against the edge of this piece. From there, we can draw an aura within here, and I like to use these lines as sort of a guide to where or how wide I want to make that. And again, I'm doing this kind of sloppy just to show you the pattern. But we draw that square inside there. Then we need to do the half dividing thing again, like this. And I'm dividing and making this little square in the same side that I did this other square, as far as the consistent pattern. And this is the piece that would be colored in. Then we just draw a line to the corner there, line to the corner there. Then from these corners, we draw down in that same direction. And you just create that illusion of this piece coming up out of there. Now the basic tangle step out then calls for us to follow these vertical or horizontal lines and create additional lines in the pattern. So I'll turn this way. Just like that. So that is the basic pattern, albeit done quite poorly there on my post-it. But as I said, you can do this in any direction as far as that corner. It doesn't matter. You're just going to divide the half, kind of find that point, create the aura, create another aura inside this little square, and then we start connecting some lines. Well, actually, we got to divide the half again. And you do this internal one in the same side that you've done the other one, just to keep the pattern consistent. Drawing a line. But it doesn't matter which way you've drawn this, and then you just put in your lines here. And you can do a version where those lines are bold, just as an example. Again, I'm doing this very quickly just to illustrate. You can do different things like that. And of course, we end up shading the piece as well. But having said that, what are we going to do on our layout? Well, I've decided to place this in the four corners of my composition. And so I've made myself also a little tool. I just took a post-it and I marked out an inch from the corner and then a half inch from the corner. Now obviously you could just simply use the ruler, but I'll show you why I like to do this, how easy this is. And I take this little tool and all I have to do is match these little notches with the edge of the paper, and that way I'm going to get a consistent size in all four corners that I do this in. And then I just trace around the edge of this little paper. Just like that. Done. But now for the inner part, and I'm going to create all of my little pieces pointing inward from the edge. So now I just line these up with the lines that I just drew. And I've created a very nice, easy to use pattern for the corner. So let's do it over on the right side. Same thing. I match these outer lines, the ones that are at 1 inch, with the edge of the paper or the area that I'm using. This is just a simple, goofy little way to do it. And I don't have to worry about trying to flip a ruler around. Then I just take this and I turn it around, and now I match those smaller inner lines with the lines I've just drawn and trace around the edge. It just helps me to ensure a consistent sizing and placement of my corner pieces. So now I'm going down here. We'll do the same thing again. Very simple. And my lower left. And you could use a tool like this, a little helpful cheat measuring device. If you're doing a bunch of these patterns side by side or right next to each other, you could just move it along your pattern area and create it that way as well. So it's just, of course, you can use a ruler, and some people might say, why did you go to the trouble of doing this? It just helps me to quickly create all of these edges in the same way and in the same size. Now we can go back and complete each of these patterns. So once I've got all 4 of these corners completed, you can see what I've done here by pointing that shape in like that, inward toward the rest of the design and page. But I'm also deciding here, because of the fineness of these lines, I'm going to take a larger 08 pen, and I'm just going to trace the outside edge of each of these squares, just to give them a little more weight and bolder appearance a little bit there, and then we'll do the shading. But let's see, how can we shade these items? So we'll zoom in and let's just pick one here randomly. Now we can shade in the traditional Zentangle sense with overlaps and corners and edges and things that are behind each other, and I think in this case that might actually be really good. So let's add a little bit of graphite here, maybe where that edge is casting a slight shadow. And how about down here where this central pillar, if you will, is maybe casting a slight shadow on the background. So add a little graphite along that edge. And I don't know if I want to put a little bit down here too, like maybe where it's coming in from the square, that we're going to see some shadow there, just again for developing a little sense of dimensionality. Let's blend that now and see what we end up with. I might need to add just a touch more I think that works okay. So I'm going to carry that on with these others here and see what we come up with. We'll carry on the same with all 4 corners here. So now we've added our day 18 tangle to the overall layout. It was a simple approach, but I didn't want to put these square shapes in the middle of all this sort of undulating tangle patterns that I've been adding. So I thought this would be a good place to do it. It lets me do 4 slight variations in terms of that direction of the inner shape, and I hope it'll work out. I may end up adding some auras and borders or darkness around that, but we'll see. Let's just see how this layout continues to evolve in the days ahead. And Gayle, how did yours come out today?
I did mine pretty much the same way as you. I like that placement.
You followed the plan, eh?
I did.
Nice. Looks like you shaded it roughly the same. You did add a little additional shadow around the top of the pillar, which is totally fine. I just did not do that on mine. Here, let's zoom in. I don't know if folks can see that very well. So there's a little shadow around this top edge, almost like it's a border. And same here. So I'll show you the difference in our side-by-side shape. So you see if I use my pencil here to point, I did not add shadow here, but Gayle did. Otherwise, it looks like we used a very similar approach to the shading. It looks like you used the same exact size, the 1-inch dimension. Is that what you ended up doing?
I did. I liked that.
Nope, that's great. It just seemed to me to be a fitting size to pop up in the corner without being too small so that we couldn't even see it.
Yep, I agree.
So there we go. We can even put ours together in a giant mosaic right now, right? So there it is. Well, folks, thanks again for taking the time to tangle with us today. I know this was a shorter and simpler tangle pattern, at least as I'm applying it here. But again, the excitement builds as the more and more we add to our layout, the more interesting it becomes, and we've got our days ahead yet. So I hope that you'll keep tuning in for the remaining days of our Inktober and Tangle Challenge. But until next time, take care, everyone. Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.